Right. This is going to be about your characters, but it's also going to be about being a human being. I am seeing a lot of posts about people that are about seasonal responses. So the Christmas tree is going up, and I'm crying. And I'm crying because I'm happy sad. I'm happy sad because the people who were here on these joyous occasions aren't here. Um, and the responses are really interesting. I want to dig into what those responses mean and what that means for us as writers. So we'll get back to that. But first, I want to read you something that happened to my friend Lily. I got her permission to talk about this. She slipped and snapped her tendon, and she is on very, very strict rest. As she is a hiker and as her passion is Scotland, she needs this to heal, and she needs to heal it properly. And she's a bit like me. She lives a lot of her process online. Sorry, I keep forgetting where the camera is. Online. And so she wrote about this. She said, 1 month from breaking my heel bone, and the swelling is finally down enough to see the tendons move very slowly and wobbly from my toes and arch all the way to my ankle again. Yep, I'm excited. Never thought I'd admire my tendons so much. Lovely, positive, right? All about her and her process. So somebody jumps onto her thread, somebody who has done this before, who is an internet bully, who she doesn't know in the real world and isn't involved with professionally. Somebody jumps on and says, "Newsflash, I'm medical secretary for orthopedic surgeons. You're doing just fine, Lily. No need to post or even panic. So many people are suffering of even worse things." Wow, listen to that. Listen to that. So then, doesn't end there. Sorry, I'm gonna read you a little bit more. Lily says, "Well, that doesn't mean I can't celebrate my own progress and be excited for my personal healing." Absolutely. And this person writes back and says, "Good for you, Lily. Let's hope all the COVID patients can post the same too soon." She says, "Let's hope so." And anyone else suffering through anything. And then the poster comes back and says, "Get a grip. Stop whining about your ankle. Really, shut it. There are worse things in life than your ankle." And then she reverts to her original language, and then again says, "Get a grip," and responds to somebody else, "Who are you?" So I call this the Pity Olympics. And I think that it is a frustrated person's way to shut down you talking about where you are in your process. Now, in this particular example, Lily is celebrating the fact that she is doing better, although she hurt her ankle. And somebody says, there are people dying of COVID. Well, those two things are not in any way related. But you see the pattern, right? You know this pattern. You know if you've ever had any kind of loss or anxiety or depression, that people, some certain kinds of people, will come back with, "There are people so much worse off than you." Well, yeah, there are. But actually, you get to just have your feelings. Whatever those feelings are, you actually get to have them. There is no pity Olympics. These things aren't comparable. And if, when you put the tree up, you cry because you miss someone, and that goes on for days and days and days, then you're still grieving and you need to grieve. You might need to check in with the people around you and explain what's going on so that they have a little bit more time and a little bit more compassion for what's going on for you. And depending on where you are in your caretaker relationships, you might need to explain to the children around you or some of the people who depend on you, "I'm not going to be as available," or "This is what's going on for daddy, this is what's going on for mummy." But you get to have those feelings. You get to feel them. And no other person's suffering is in any way about your suffering. This really matters when you're thinking about characters, because you get those kind of conflicts in both in real life and in fiction. And I'm going to say that that kind of pain or grief response has a function. It is serving a function. And you need to work out whether or not, after a certain amount of time, so let's say that you've been grieving for 20 years every time you put the tree up, is that still serving you? Does feeling that feeling and reconnecting with that love, because that's what you're doing, grief is a love response. So you're reconnecting with that love. If that still serves you and that still fills the well for you and isn't depleting, there is no reason for you to stop doing that. None at all. If it's debilitating, if now this has turned into something that stops you from functioning, stops you from doing what you love, is no longer filling the well, then you need to start thinking about why it is you're still doing that. Has it become habitual? Is it something that you're doing partly out of guilt because you don't want to lose this person, because you feel if you don't grieve them, that is a kind of betrayal? If it is no longer serving its purpose and it's something that you want to contain in a different way now, then you need to think about how to contain it. And what's really fascinating is the brain doesn't understand not. The brain doesn't understand don't do that, because don't do that includes that. So the thing that you're trying to stop is now in your brain. We've talked about this before. This is why dieting doesn't work the way that it's currently set up, because you're thinking about food all the time. And when you're thinking about food, then you're thinking about being hungry, and then you're thinking about eating. So in this case, because we're using the Christmas tree as our analogy. So you've got this ongoing grief that you've decided doesn't serve you in the way that it used to serve you, and isn't anymore about celebrating that love and the gap that grief is celebrating the gap, right? And that doesn't serve you anymore. What can you do about that? What can you do about thoughts that you no longer believe serve you? And this can be a day long, a month long, a year long, 20 years long. The road to getting your brain reconditioned is a long road, and there are a bunch of different things that you can do. Weirdly enough, practicing mindfulness, if you have ever done any kind of uh, it falls under yoga, but it isn't really yoga, but meditative techniques that are about mindfulness. Mindfulness is about watching your brain, so this super ego function of watching what you're doing and noticing what you're doing and making a decision about what you're doing. I had a great hypnotherapist who would have me take thoughts and put them the other side of the moon, where I wasn't able to see them. So they still exist, but you're doing something with them. You are actually doing something with them, and you're replacing them with something else. And it's a practice. It's a daily practice. You really have to work at it, because again, there's no such thing as not. If you say to yourself, stop crying, stop thinking about this, stop grieving, you're telling yourself not to do the thing. So now the thing is very present for you again. Um, I wrote myself some notes. Hang on. Nope. We've done all that. So there is no pity Olympics. Your pain is yours. It has a function. It was good for you. What purpose does it serve now? Do you want it gone? And what is that long road? We're coming up on 10 minutes. So I hope that this is useful for your characters. I hope it's useful for some of the things that are going on now. I try and think compassionately about the angry person as well. So the person who responded to Lily has got a lot going on. Their tolerance for listening to somebody who's in pain is at zero. They have zero desire to listen to someone in pain. And, you know, I kind of get that. I grew up with somebody who had a back injury and who complained about their pain all the time. And every single time they stood up or sat down, they went, and so my response when people make that particular noise is just to shut down completely, because it never ended. It never ended. And so when I see somebody like this responder who responded to Lily, I think, okay, they have reached beyond their ability to cope, and actually they need a lot of help. So rather than trashing them, I try to approach them with compassion, with like, wow, something went very, very wrong and you don't know how to fix it. If you lash out at somebody else's pain, if you tell somebody to shut up and stop doing something, if you are emotionally invested in somebody else not feeling something, then that's about you. That's not about them. All right. I hope that's a useful thing about your character. I hope it's useful, like generally speaking. And now that I got the Pity Olympics out there, I'm feeling a bit better. All right. Goodbye, doom scribblers.